News of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. And in fact, this week we have entered a new dimension. This is a world of pure make-believe. It is the world fabricated by the President, the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, all of them telling us that we're safe and everything is A-OK, all right in America. Listen to the Secretary of State this week trying to tell us, hey, folks, just relax.
There is actually less threat, less probability of people dying in some sort of violent conflict today than at any time in human history.
It is preposterous. What he said is preposterous. And it's not only false on the face of it, based on what Americans can see and feel and touch and hear every day, but it's even contradicted by other members of the government. He's trying to tell us that everything is fine. But look at what we have seen. Beheadings. James Foley. Peter Kasich. The murder of that beautiful aid worker, Kayla Mueller. It goes on and on. The Boston Marathon bombings on American soil. We had a terrorist attack. We had a police officer attacked in New York City. And most recently, ISIS is not only saying, Obama, we're coming for you and we're going to take over the White House, but they're saying, Americans, whenever you go shopping in every mall that you might want to spend a leisurely afternoon, we will be there. We are going to hunt you down. We are going to scare you out of living your daily lives. We are going to hunt you and we're going to kill you. And the Secretary of State, with a straight face, is trying to tell us that everything is just fine. It would be really funny if it wasn't so deadly serious. But thank God we have at least some voices of reason and good sense within the government. The Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, testified before Congress that it isn't so. Listen.
When the final accounting is done, 2014 will have been the most lethal year for global terrorism in the 45 years such data has been compiled. About half of all attacks as well as fatalities in 2014 occurred in just 3 countries, Iraq, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. I'm drawing this data. ISIL conducted more attacks than any other terrorist group in the first 9 months of 2014.
Guess John Kerry did not get that message.
No, and some folks within the intelligence community are saying, is the administration reading our daily briefings, our intelligence reports? Are they reading this stuff? Because this boggles the mind. But, you know, it also reinforces what I've been saying for the longest time. You have really an incompetent administration because I've never seen this kind of a situation where one team is saying one thing and you have folks within the government contradicting them. They're not on the same page. They're not on message. There's no discipline here. There's no strong work ethic here. This you can see right before your eyes is a house divided. It's an administration divided. It's a free-for-all. We've got to ask, who's running the show here? And the American people are nervous. And the American people are worried. And more, there's a belief that sooner or later we are going to be hit. And that our government is not being proactive enough, is not doing the right things to keep us safe. And this kind of talk only reinforces that perception. Well, you know, in the news this week, another day, another Clinton scandal. Last week, we covered a really interesting story, and this week it got even worse. Last week, it was revealed that Hillary Clinton, through the foundation that she and her husband run, the Clinton Foundation, which was then recently renamed, that they had resumed collecting money from foreign nations. They had resumed that after she left office. And you had many people, including folks like Ron Fournier, who writes for the National Journal, saying, you know, this is stupid and this is sleazy. Even Juan Williams was piling on. Many folks on the left said, look, this is real dumb of the Clintons to be resuming this, because if she's going to run for office, it's going to call into question her character. And everybody's going to ponder, is she selling influence? Are the Clintons selling influence? Well, this week, the news got worse. A story in the Washington Post really blows the lid off what the Clintons have been doing. The Clintons did not resume collecting money from foreigners only after she left office. They kept doing it the whole time she was in office. At least 7 foreign governments continued to provide funds to the Clintons while she was Secretary of State. Now, she had struck a deal with the Obama administration that all of this would end. And this was a huge issue when she was being confirmed as Secretary of State. Many people on the left and on the right said, look, this presents an ethical problem that your husband has this foundation and you want to be Secretary of State. And she assured them everything would be transparent, everything would be revealed. She even signed an agreement with the Obama administration pledging to stop the collection of foreign money and to also make all of the dealings of the organization transparent. Well, the Washington Post has revealed not so. They did not disclose that they took a $500,000 donation from the Algerian government. The Algerian government. And it gets worse. They took this money at a time in which there was more and more lobbying activity by the Algerian government in Washington. They were trying to get Washington to underplay all the human rights abuses of the Algerian government. So there was an intense lobbying campaign by the Algerians at the same time that Hillary was Secretary of State and Bill Clinton collected $500,000 from them. This money allegedly was supposed to go to Haiti to help the victims of the earthquake. But any thoughtful person has to ask, why would the Algerian government, if they truly cared about the victims of the Haitian earthquake, why would they give the money to the Clintons instead of giving it to Haiti directly or to a philanthropic organization on the ground? It's obvious the government was buying influence. And we know now that there were governments like Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. These governments were providing the Clintons with funds throughout the time that she was Secretary of State. Now, this is going to be a big scandal, and it's going to get bigger and bigger. And I'll tell you why. What we need to do now is we need to explore all of her travels. Remember, this is a point of great pride for Hillary Clinton. She keeps saying that she has traveled around the country. We keep asking, But there's no achievements here. You didn't do anything as Secretary of State with all these travels. You basically met people for tea. That's what you did. Now the question is, since you weren't actually doing the work of the American people, since you actually weren't advancing American self-interest, were you really meeting all those governments in order to line the pockets of the foundation? Was she really going around the country to build more and more cash for her and her family and the foundation? This is going to destroy her. If the media stays on this story, it will destroy her. Now, the foundation has revealed the total amount given by various countries who have given money to them, but they have not revealed a year-by-year breakdown. And the press has to push to get as much information as possible. And these foundations, these charitable foundations, they're supposed to be transparent. By law, they are supposed to be transparent. So if the press asks enough questions, that information has to be provided. And I smell a rat here. I smell a huge rat here. The Clintons have a reputation for selling influence. They sold the Lincoln bedroom while Bill Clinton was in office. That was a huge scandal at the time. And it's obvious that throughout Secretary Clinton's tenure, these cheap tricks didn't stop. They got worse. And the amount of money collected is huge. And the stakes are bigger. Because now we are talking about foreign governments literally buying politicians, having them in their back pocket. And that is a threat, a direct threat to our national security. You know, recently, I've got to admit, I was one of those folks that was shocked and blindsided when the former governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell, was accused of corruption, accused of being corrupt while in office. And then there was a trial, and he and his wife were ultimately indicted, found to be guilty. They were indicted and then found to be guilty. And they're going to go to jail. Both of them are going to go to jail. And what was the governor's crime? Well, it amounted to, he took about $120,000 worth of gifts from a businessman in order to promote that businessman's interests. $120,000, and this man and his wife are going to jail. Bill and Hillary Clinton should be thoroughly investigated. This is criminal activity. I believe that if the press stays on this story, these violations are so grave, these acts, these misdeeds are so serious, that if we have a true public outcry over this, it should ultimately result in the indictment of Bill and Hillary Clinton. This is criminal activity. I know it, I see it, I smell it, and so do many people in the press. You're listening to Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com, and every week we uphold values that never die, even in the Twilight Zone.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Well, we're looking for patriotic leadership, and it is nowhere to be found. President Barack Hussein Obama is trying desperately to hammer out a deal with the Iranians which in essence will allow them to move forward towards getting nuclear weapons. He insists that any deal with the Iranians is going to be a good deal because there will be an ability to monitor the activities and delay the activities, delay their ability to get a bomb. Right now, it looks like he's on the verge of concluding some kind of a deal whereby it will be valid for a 10-year period and the Iranians will be monitored throughout and they will become what is called a nuclear threshold state, which is, in essence, at any point of their choosing, they will be able to very quickly move towards a nuclear weapon. The president is trying to argue that this is somehow better than the way things were before, when sanctions were in place. But he's lying to us. He believes that this is going to be one of his signature achievements. In reality, he is negotiating with the sworn enemies of Israel and with our sworn enemies, duplicitous people who can't be trusted and who have vowed to act against the interests of Western civilization. Now, Speaker Boehner, knows what is at stake. And recently, he invited the leader of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, to come to give a speech before Congress. And that speech is going to take place next week. I thought that a reporter from the Washington Examiner by the name of Susan Ferrecchio said it best. Speaker Boehner showed Obama, well, guess what? He's got a pen and he's got a phone too. He invited Netanyahu to come without working in harmony with the White House. And the White House is livid. They have been trying to put pressure on Netanyahu not to come and deliver this speech. They're throwing everything at him because they know that Netanyahu will expose how dangerous the president's Iranian negotiations are. Now, some members of Congress, some Democrats, are so angry that Netanyahu is coming without having coordinated this with the White House that they have threatened to walk out of Congress. And this week in the Wall Street Journal, there was a really good piece by Alan Dershowitz called The Appalling Talk of Boycotting Netanyahu. And he argues, how dare any member of Congress even consider boycotting a speech by the Israeli leader? The boycott of a speech to Congress should be done only if that person is somebody who is notoriously evil, not a respected leader of a country. And certainly not in an instance in which Congress is exercising its power in the Constitution to play a role in foreign policy. Speaker Boehner has acted within the constitutional powers that he has been given. And Netanyahu is so alarmed about this impending deal that he's willing to risk the ire of the White House to come and talk directly to the American people. What is at stake for Israel is their very existence, he has said. He doesn't care what slings and arrows the White House is going to throw at him. His very life is at stake, as is the life of every single person in that country. Iran has vowed to wipe them out. And if he doesn't alarm the world and put a stop to it, you're going to see a calamity there, even worse than the Holocaust. Secretary Kerry is trying to diminish the standing of Netanyahu. Listen to what he has said, trying to deride this man.
And that's something that you and people in Israel and everybody else have to make your judgment about. I'm not going to get dragged into that particular choice or how it came about. I don't think that's helpful. I will say this.
It's his criticism I'm asking you to address.
Well, let me say this. The Prime Minister, as you recall, was profoundly forward-leaning and outspoken about the importance of invading Iraq under George W. Bush, and we all know what happened with that decision. He was extremely outspoken about how bad the interim agreement was, during which time he called it the deal of the century for Iran, even though it has clearly stopped Iran's program, and more importantly, he has decided it would be good to continue it. So, he's, I talk to him frequently. We work very, very closely together. We are deeply committed, this administration. I think we've done more to help Israel. I have a packet of 25 pages or more of things we've done on behalf of Israel in the course of this administration to stand up for it, stand with it, protect, fight back against unfair initiatives. So we won't take a backseat to anybody in our commitment to the State of Israel.
Well, again, the Secretary of State is living in his own universe. For a prime minister like Netanyahu to openly defy the wishes of the White House and come forward to talk to Congress, for him to do that, it means that he has no faith whatsoever that this administration is protecting the interests of Israel. And I thought that this week, the person who said it best, once again, was the straight-talking former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. He outlined very clearly what the Iranians are doing and how foolish the Obama administration is in dealing with them. Roll it, Brittany.
So let's review the agreement, because this is really what's at stake here. And then one other thing that's so important. Iran wants, it says, the peaceful use of nuclear power. Iran has 300 years of natural gas and oil reserves, and they haven't started fracking or hydraulic drilling yet. They may have 1,000 years of reserves. I'm an expert on energy because that's what my law firm does. Iran does not need a nuclear power plant for power. They got plenty of energy to export to the rest of the world. There is no reason in the world for them to have the peaceful use of nuclear power. Maybe France needs it. Maybe countries without natural resources need it. But Iran doesn't need it. So, why have they been doing this? They've been doing this because they want to become a nuclear power. Not only that, they have written that, they have said that, they have described that. The president reformer who runs Iran, Rouhani, in 03 and 05, continued to enrich uranium while they had a standstill agreement with us. He did it secretly and bragged about it, and we're negotiating with him. This is like playing poker with a guy who cheated you twice before. You know who does that? A moron.
And I applaud Giuliani for this open disrespect. I applaud Giuliani for this open disrespect of these policies. These are foolish policies. Last week, he was in the hot seat for saying that the president does not love this country. And I wrote a piece, which you can find at worldtribune.com. It is called What Giuliani Said Squares with What Obama Has Done. What Giuliani said squares with what Obama has done. It's at worldtribune.com. And I outline basically what I said in last week's monologue. If you look at everything that this president has said that he believes in, ultimately it is a rejection of America, of American traditional values, of its ethos, and of its foreign policy. And it's obvious that this president is acting in a way that is directly contrary to the best interests of one of our dearest allies in the Middle East, Israel. I encourage you all to read that piece and also to chime in on the debate that has ensued in the commentary section of World Tribune. There are now 69 comments, and so many of them have been vicious. In talking to my friends, they have said, you know what? You really hit a nerve with this piece. That's why the liberals are coming out in force. You hit a nerve. Well, at least I have some defenders. We have one of the latest comments by somebody who writes, well said, Grace Vuoto, well said. I'm 75 years old, and I've never seen our great country so polarized in its disparate views. President Barack Obama is, in my opinion, largely responsible for this state of affairs. Any criticism of his administration or of himself brings cries of racism from his supporters. He should have been impeached about 2 years ago. Indeed, I think that is so. It is unfortunate that our Congress doesn't do what obviously it should do, which is impeach this president before a catastrophe ensues. Because that is really what I'm afraid of. And that is what Bibi Netanyahu is afraid of. And that's why he's going to come to this country begging for the public to wake up and to stand in solidarity with him and his people at this crucial moment. Let us not take a wrecking ball right to the face of our closest ally, Israel, by proceeding on a catastrophic deal with Iran. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values that will not die.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
If you feel like happiness is the truth, because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you, because I'm happy.
Welcome back. Well, it is time for CPAC in Washington, D.C. That is a conference where conservatives from across the country, conservative individuals come to listen to some of the best and brightest conservatives, members of Congress and future leaders. And I always used to really enjoy going there when I lived in Washington, D.C. It was a fabulous time to listen to up-and-comers, also listen to the old-timers and hear what they had to say, get to meet people that you've only seen on television. And I can tell you, when you meet people, you always get different insights about them. You get to see different facets of their character. And what was also really, really fun for me was to walk amongst the crowd, to see who was there in the audience, and to talk to so many people from around the country and to hear what they were thinking about the state of the country, the direction we should take, and who they liked and who they didn't like. CPAC is really one giant conservative forum. It's a blast. If you have never done this and you're a diehard conservative and you're looking for something fun to do, I recommend that you go ahead and make it a tourist adventure. If you live in some other part of the country, book your travels to Washington while CPAC is in town. You can do a little bit of politics and sightseeing, and I assure you, you won't regret it. There are celebrities really walking the corridors. I mean, conservative celebrities walking the corridors of CPAC. You'll see famous authors, and they're all very accessible. Like Ann Coulter will walk down the hall, and you can talk to just about anybody. I remember one of my most cherished CPAC moments, one of the most interesting ones, was I actually sat down and had a long conversation with Kathleen Willey. This is the woman that was accosted, was sexually assaulted by Bill Clinton. And I was at CPAC and I interviewed her there and we struck up a really, really long conversation. I mean, this is the kind of experience you can have at CPAC, a very unique experience where you can meet people. Even she was a former Democrat who was there, basically walking the halls, talking to anybody that would listen. So you have lots of interesting characters there. So what's going on this time at CPAC? Well, Marco Rubio is making waves. Marco Rubio, suddenly he's had a come to Jesus moment. Yeah, Marco Rubio is now apologizing. He has acknowledged that he made a mistake when he championed comprehensive immigration reform, that he has learned from his experience, and that, in fact, this president can't be trusted, and that the American people were right, that unless you secure the border, you can't go forward with any policy, and that the worst fear of the Americans has proven to be accurate, is that we're just not putting an end to all of this lawless immigration. And he now recants. And I don't believe a single word coming out of his mouth. I am not a fan of Marco Rubio. I think he is slippery. I think he is duplicitous. It's very obvious what happened. After conservatives had lost in 2012, so many people were saying, oh, we've got to make concessions to the Hispanics. This is the way we've got to go forward. And that drumbeat had been going on for a long time. That the long-term future of the Republican Party lies in making some kind of a deal on immigration reform. Well, Marco Rubio, who was considered a darling after he was elected in 2008, the press was fawning all over him. He decided that he was going to try to render his credentials even greater, that he was going to become like this brilliant conservative leader by championing immigration reform. And then the public opinion has turned. And what he has shown is that he is fickle. He was initially, all in the camp of the Tea Party. Then when it looked like public opinion was changing and there's more and more people were talking about making compromises to the Hispanics, and that was the only way forward for the Republicans, then he changed his mind and adopted comprehensive immigration reform. Now, the grassroots is adamantly opposed to what they've seen as a wholesale invasion of our borders, whether it's from children pouring in and then this president with his lawless executive amnesty. The grassroots are outraged. And Rubio understands what is as plain as day. You're not going to get anywhere with the grassroots unless you take a strong stand on immigration. And you know what? He's playing us. He's lying. What he's going to do is right now to try to win over support of the grassroots and get his campaign rolling. He hasn't announced officially, but it looks like he will. He's going to say everything he needs to say to win over the conservative base. And then guess what? If he wins and then runs in a general election, he's going to talk from the other side of his mouth and say, no. He also supported immigration reform. So he's going to be able to play it both ways. That is slippery. That is cowardly. That revolts me. I'm so sick and tired of politicians who are playing us, lying to us. It amazes me that we are not casting him right off the stage. It amazes me that we are not being much more forceful in shutting this guy down and out. He is not the man that we need to lead us in the future. He's another version of Speaker Boehner and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He's another version of them. He went from being a Tea Party darling to right there inside the Washington establishment, acting just like them, talking just like them, and being just as slippery. Other candidates making waves at CPAC. Well, Governor Scott Walker. You know I'm a fan of his. I'm a fan of the Wisconsin governor. I think he's got a fantastic record. But I'm worried. And I've been sounding the alarms now. This is the third week in a row. And this guy keeps giving me reasons to be worried. He made a misstep, which we covered on this show, when he didn't answer squarely on evolution. And then he was asked by reporters after Giuliani's comment that the president doesn't love America. He was asked to weigh in, and he was also asked, what do you think about the president's religious views? Do you think that he's a Christian? And he said, I don't know whether he is or isn't. I've never talked to him about the issue. And he went on to say that the American people don't care about such issues, and that he's just there to talk about the issues that American people care about. Well, to me, this was again a very weak answer, because he went on and on saying, I haven't heard much about the issue. This is not an important issue. Again, this is what worries me. Does he not read the papers? I'm talking about the national papers. We've had a discussion about the president's religious beliefs since the campaign of 2008, when many questions were raised. And the president has weighed in several times on his beliefs. He asserts that he's a Christian. He explains that he became a Christian later in life and that Reverend Jeremiah Wright led him to this. And you have many folks saying he doesn't stand up for Christianity. He doesn't stand up for Christians around the world. He doesn't act like a Christian since he's been in office. So I've got to say, when somebody asks a question like, is President Barack Hussein Obama a Christian? It has been in the news. It has been talked about. Whatever opinion you have, there's a lot to say about this. To say I haven't heard much about it, I don't know either way, whether he is or he isn't, that is a really amateurish answer. That worries me. That really worries me. This is the third amateurish answer in a row, back to back. And his campaign hasn't officially even started. And he's given me a headache. In addition, he then writes this piece. He writes a piece. I refuse to take the media's bait is what it's called. And it's an op-ed in which he argues that our nation has very, very serious challenges to face. Yes, 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 yes. And he's not going to play the media game. He's not going to answer these gotcha questions. And he concludes the piece by saying, I'm always going to choose to focus on what matters to the American people, not what matters to the media. I'm sorry, Governor Walker, but this just doesn't cut it. The president's behavior towards Christians, the fact that he hasn't stood up for Christianity around the world, that matters to the American people. The kind of Christianity that he professes to have, that matters to the American people. The fact that there are so many questions raised about this man constantly defending the Muslim faith and not defending the Christian faith, this matters to the American people. And that's amateur hour. This is amateur hour. The media is going to ask you everything. And guess what? You better have a good answer. And what disturbs me about this is somebody I want to like. This is somebody I want to believe in. What disturbs me about this is I find this is disingenuous. You know what? If you really didn't want to play the media game, then after you bungled it on evolution, why did you come out with a statement answering the question on evolution? After he refused to answer what his position on evolution is, he then came out and said in a written statement, well, yes, I believe that there's no conflict between my faith and science, etc., etc. Well, if you're serious about you don't want to answer these gotcha questions, how come you're willing to answer them after the fact? No. What really happened is you were caught flat-footed. You didn't provide a good answer. There was a media firestorm. And then you were forced to provide an answer. And you didn't take that stand based on principle. You took that stand because you're ignorant. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm seeing. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm seeing. And like I said before, this has nothing to do with one's level of education. This has to do with one's level of knowledge and one's ability to read consistently on the national issues. And so far, he is winning the hearts and minds of the conservatives out there, but I see very dangerous signs that he may soar and then collapse on the national stage, just like Rick Perry did, just like Sarah Palin did. Now, there's somebody else that I keep praising, even though this guy doesn't have enough executive experience. It's Senator Ted Cruz. He is blazing a trail for everybody out there. And he's the only candidate out there right now that is actually saying specifically what he would do if he were in office. He said in an interview on Fox News that he was asked, what kind of an agenda would you have? And he said, well, number one, repeal every blasted word of Obamacare. Number two, abolish the IRS. Take all 123,000 IRS agents and put them on our southern border. Number three, stop the out-of-control regulators at the EPA and all of the other regulatory bodies. Number four, defend our constitutional rights, all of them. And number five, restore America's leadership in the world as a shining city on a hill. Boom, boom, boom. A 5-step plan. Of course, he would have to give more details, but his answers are sharp. They're rooted in knowledge. They're rooted in media savvy in terms of being able to say a lot in few words. I definitely see bright things for this man in the future. And I hope that all of the other governors out there who are vying for the attention of the American people can take a page out of the Cruz playbook and be very versed in the national issues that are dear to the American people, in the foreign policy issues that are dear to the American people. It's time, guys, to show the media that you are ready for any question. Don't whine. Don't whine. Just get the answer right. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values that aren't going to die.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Welcome back. It's great to spend time with you. Please check out my latest article at worldtribune.com. It has gone viral. Literally, it has gone viral. What Giuliani said squares with what Obama has done. Well, it is time now for the Just Shut Up segment, where we find some candidate to say just shut up to, somebody who really, really deserves it. Before I get to that, I want to have just a couple of quick comments on the Oscars. The Oscar ceremony was boring. I watched it all from A to Z. And there was a small controversy about whether or not the host should have come out in his underwear at one point. Now, I, as the culture critic of worldtribune.com, should have been offended at that. But I got to be honest with you. It was so boring that when he came out in his underwear, I laughed. I actually found it very funny. And looking back, I've got to ask myself, usually I find something like that offensive, deplorable. Well, look, if you're going to be celebrating movies that nobody has seen, an American Sniper just winning for sound editing, by the time the host comes out in his underwear, it's all good, guys. It's all good. I mean, you gotta have some kind of fun. All right. Well, the big story of the Oscars is that there's a stunning actress. Her name is Lupita Nyong'o. She wore the best dress of the night by far. By far, it is gorgeous. If you haven't seen it, I mean, it's a real showstopper. It's made out of 6,000 pearls. She is beautiful, this actress. I always love her style and her grace. And apparently, the dress has been stolen. It was stolen from her hotel room. So not only was it a showstopper, but it's now actually in the news. Wonder what happens and if they ever catch the guy. But her coming out in that dress, I think, is the moment of the Oscars. And it shows us here in America that we can still create really beautiful things. And we still have women that epitomize true grace and beauty. Not so for this woman that deserves to be told to just shut up. It's Monique. Monique is in the news. She's whining and complaining. This is a woman who won the Oscar for her fearless performance as a mother in 2009's Precious. She won the Oscar. But since then, has she worked much? No, not very much. Why? Because folks in Hollywood say that she's difficult. And she's come out this week trying to defend herself. Roll it, Brittany.
When I did the movie Precious for Mr. Daniels, I was paid $50,000. I'm not complaining about the money because that's what I signed up for. What he did say was, you've been blackballed because you didn't play the game. To say that I'm difficult, any project that I've ever done, when they say rap and that's it, we're all hugging and crying, speaking about the great experience that we had.
Do you think there are ways that you could react or act differently in the future where you wouldn't be labeled as difficult?
You know what, Les? To stand up for what's wrong, I couldn't do that any differently. Would I not stand up for Gabourey Sidibe, who they wanted to fly coach to France? That's a long ride, and we're big women. I'll still stand up for that. I'll never stop standing up for injustice. Should I be bullied and just accept it? Or do I say, this is unfair?
Do you want to work with her? I don't want to work with her. This woman is difficult. You can see that in her answers. First of all, she's saying, I was only paid $50,000, blah, blah, blah. That's okay. That's what I was signed up for. The truth of the matter is, after she won the Oscar, she thought, oh, I should be paid so much money. She's come out saying stuff like, they were giving me offers like I just rolled off of a Greyhound bus, you know. She's got attitude. She is difficult. Did it ever occur that maybe everybody hugging and crying at the end of a shoot with her is just crying in relief? You know, to be labeled as demanding and difficult in Hollywood, I mean, that's a cesspool of the demanding and the difficult. You've got to reach a very high level of demanding and difficult to be called difficult and to be blackballed. But, you know, even in her defense, you can see it. She's saying that she was fighting to be able to fly first class to coach. Oh, Monique, you're so accommodating. You know, you're so reasonable. Look, movies have budgets. And they got to respect their budgets. It's obvious that this woman was making a stink about everything, and she continues to make a stink. Instead of saying to the Academy, thank you, it is such an honor to have won an Oscar. This is a privilege afforded to few actors and actresses. It is the most coveted of all prizes. And from here on in, I'm just going to take every opportunity that is given to me, and I'm going to continue to build my reputation and become truly a formidable actress. Instead of doing that, being grateful and working hard, the Oscar went right to her head, and she thought suddenly she's Meryl Streep. Well, you know what, Monique? You should have been on your hands and knees saying thank you for that Oscar, for a picture nobody's seen. And you should have used that in a humble way to take every opportunity that was given to you. Instead, you came across and continue to come across like a spoiled, whining, ungrateful diva. But you don't have the talent of a diva, so you can't get away with it. And guess what, Monique? It looks like you are being treated like an actress that just came off of a Greyhound bus, because you're acting like an actress that just came off of a Greyhound bus. And you know, Monique, this doesn't help your situation. Take my advice. You should just shut up. And it's time for the mailbag. Please write to me. valuesthatneverdie@hotmail.com. valuesthatneverdie@hotmail.com. A letter by Shane from Syracuse, New York. Dr. Grace, we should cheer Giuliani for speaking truth to power. President Obama's favorite sport is denigrating America. I love folks who, after a certain age, just actually speak the truth and they don't care. It tends to happen, folks who are, into their 60s and 70s. At some point, they're like, I had my career, I have my money, I'm just going to say it as I see it. And he is a breath of fresh air. And I hope that we have many, many more statements that are powerful, that cut through our culture smog, like he just did. Carrie from Marietta, Georgia. Giuliani doesn't know what he's talking about. Obama loves America, and that's why he's not settling for the status quo and is trying to improve life for so many minorities. You know what, Carrie? Tell it to the minorities who have double-digit unemployment with this president. He's not helping anybody. He's hurting us. Letter. Antoinette from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Dr. Grace, stop smearing Clinton. She's paved the way for women leaders and should become president in 2016. Not so fast. Not so fast. She took money by foreign governments who are notorious for oppressing women. Once again, she supports the enablers of female oppressors. She did it with her husband, and she did it on a national stage. An international stage. And Ian from Ballard, Utah. Dr. Grace, the Clintons have had many strange bedfellows over the years. Why are we shocked that foreign governments funding terrorists are part of the Clinton Foundation? Well, I'm just shocked, to be honest with you, that the Washington Post is reporting it and following up on it. That's what shocks me. A letter by John from Jonesboro, Arkansas. Thanks for continuing to keep Obama accountable. Why does he have a hard time identifying Islamic terrorism? Does he also think the sky is green? Well, according to him and the Secretary of State, not only can they not say the word Islamic terrorism, they're also trying to tell us we're safe. That's how preposterous they're getting. Lucy from Bangor. I loved Carl Gallup's analysis of Obama's speech at the National Prayer Breakfast. Obama's comments were inaccurate and really offensive to Christians. Well, Gallup's is a good friend of mine, and he too speaks the truth all the time. Tony from Bloomington, Indiana. Dr. Grace, you're naive to think that military force is the only way to eradicate radical Islam. Improving the lot of those disenfranchised in the Middle East will go a long way to stopping to breed future terrorists. Look, we have a huge problem. Military force is one leg of the solution, but poverty is not the cause of this ideological outbreak. In fact, this week, we know that Jihadi John, the guy with a London accent who's beheading people, he came from a well-to-do neighborhood of London. Poverty is not the cause of radical Islam. It is rooted in a despicable ideology that seeks to destroy Western civilization. This is Dr. Grace, every week upholding values that are not going to die. Thanks for listening, and see you all next week.
I was born by God's dear grace.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.